Hello and welcome to a Tuesday edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined today by Kurt Weiler and Charles Fishbein. And guys, it's probably about as busy. We thought it might slow down a little bit, but it has not. It's been a very busy week at Florida State with the portals comings and goings and recruiting on the portal, and then new assistant coaches being hired. So a lot to talk about, and this week's only going to get busier as the portal visit period runs through Sunday, December 22nd. I believe that's right. Maybe Monday, but anyway, can't visit after the night of the 22nd. So we've seen a number of guys on campus, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I think where we want to start, guys, is with the announcement yesterday that Darrell Jackson, defensive tackle for Florida State, was returning for his senior year. About a week or so ago, he had announced that he was going to enter the NFL draft. Obviously, had a change of heart, and I don't know if you've heard us talk about it or read any of our board stuff on the portal. Before he entered the portal, the draft, we thought just because of where Florida State's numbers were from a defensive line standpoint, and because of his still untapped potential, and with the new staff, that this would be somebody they would target. And so, Kurt, I'm going to start with you because you wrote an article about it, because new defensive line coach Terrence Knighton talked about a little bit about Darrell Jackson today, and it's almost reaffirming what I said a week and a half ago. It's almost like I was around this business my whole life. But what did he have to say about Terrence Knighton? About Darrell Jackson today when he met with the press for the first time?
He talked about that retaining Darrell was kind of a big instant priority of his from when he was officially hired about a week and a half ago on December 6th, I think. And so I think could Darrell have potentially been a late round draft pick this year? Absolutely. I think it's possible. I think he would have been a priority undrafted free agent if not. But you look at his frame, you look at what we see on the practice field, and that you started to see more as this past season went on, and you see a guy who with a good year production could be a much higher draft pick. So I think as a former NFL defensive tackle himself, Terrence Knighton is a pretty prominent guy to be able to talk to Darrell and say, hey, here's what you're doing great. Here's some things where if you decide to come back, and I'd love to have you back, these are areas where I can help you improve so that you are, probably could be potentially a good bit higher in next year's draft. And I think good on him for selling that vision. And I think it's smart of Darrell to buy it because, he could absolutely be a much higher draft pick in 2026 if he comes back and has a good year than he was going to be in April's draft next year.
Yeah, and listen, he is a guy that, he played better ball towards the back half of the year. I think everyone that covers Florida State now has pointed that out. We pointed it out during the second half of the season. Ultimately, you would like to see a guy with his ability dominate throughout the year because he has the potential to dominate offensive lines. He was going to get drafted at some point in the draft. I figured one of the reasons I don't know if he's got his draft grade back or not, but certainly probably third to fourth roundish is what I think. And I know for a fact that he had near a seven-figure offer in NIL from a Big Ten team. And so, this was going to be a guy that was wanted either by another school at the college level or by somebody in the pros because, as you mentioned, Kurt, you just don't find kids that big that can move the way he does and as strong as he is. And I think, I think the new voices on that defensive side of the ball could help guys like Darrell Jackson, and we'll talk about some more later. But Fish, what was your reaction when you found out or learned yesterday that Darrell was coming back?
I think it could be nothing but a plus. They really needed. They have an issue with depth and talent at the interior defensive line. Him coming back, I think, gives them a big piece to what they want to run defensively. They need guys up front, even though they're going to a 3-3-5. He will fit what they're trying to do. He could play inside or out. So having him back's a big plus.
Yeah, particularly when you can take into consideration that Tamuia Durajay is in the portal, along with Marvin Jones Jr., Grady Kelly. So you've taken 3 away of the bodies that you thought you'd have. And then listen, I think the good news for Florida State, and we cannot futurecast for some reason portal picks through rivals, but as I put on Twitter earlier today, I think the news is going to get better for Florida State because Nebraska defensive end James Williams just finished his official visit with Florida State, 2-day official visit with Florida State this morning. And listen, he says it's down to Florida State and one other school. I think that's either Texas A&M or Nebraska. I'm not sure which of the two. But one of the reasons I put in my future cast for James of Florida State is because he was talking in the present tense during his exit interview about Florida State. But, listen, he's obviously a highly productive player in his one season at Nebraska, signed with Nebraska out of Arizona Western Community College, and is a guy that certainly was successful for Nebraska on third down situations. He mentioned as much, wants to turn into a well-rounded player based on what he told us today. But what are y'all's thoughts on Florida State landing James, particularly with, things probably not going exactly like we thought they would with some of these Nebraska players at Florida State. But Fish, I'll start with you on James.
No, he's a huge get. Once again, if they're going to win games, they have to improve on the offensive and defensive line. Getting Jackson back, adding James in there would be huge. He's a different type of player than Jackson. He gives them an edge guy. He gives them a guy that could set the edge on run plays. He gives them some ability to put pressure on the quarterback. So he'd be a great get, I believe. Definitely be a major improvement at a position of need. Listen, I'm not surprised that a lot of these guys from Nebraska aren't coming. I mean, these kids don't really owe these coaches anything. I mean, you're not guaranteed anything, especially when they hit the portal. And now you have basically free agency where it's high man wins. And, they don't need to get all of them, but they needed to get 1 or 2 of them to help them up front.
Well, they got the most productive one. I mean, you talk about, I think Jamari Butler and Prince Will Uman could both be productive players. They went to SEC schools, or they've announced that. I don't know if they've been kind of officially announced, but they announced. I think they had combined 2.5 sacks this year, and James Williams had 5. I mean, I think obviously we still don't entirely know what's going on with Pat Payton. That's an interesting thing. He's not in the portal yet. He has another, 11 days, 12 days. He could enter the portal through, I think, a week from Saturday, I think, is the portal deadline on the 28th. But as of now, I think we thought it was unlikely he'd be back. And especially if you're losing him, you need that pass rusher. And I think James Williams has proven he can do that at a place like Nebraska.
Well, and I think the great thing about getting James, if that were to happen, and like I said, I think it is. I mean, the kid certainly has a unique bond with Knighton and Tony White based on what he said leaving Tallahassee today. But I think his best football, because he is such a young guy with 2 more years of eligibility remaining and can still grow into his body. I know I saw some comments on Twitter about how skinny he was. And you put him in a football uniform, he doesn't look skinny. And I would make this comp from a physique standpoint. I would imagine that this was a lot what Max Crosby, the defensive end for the Raiders, looked like. Because Max is he does not look huge, right? He's more long than big, than bowed up. And so, listen, he knows. He talked today about, listen, I've got to be a better first and second. Essentially what he was saying to us is I've got to be a better first and second down defensive end. And I think what will help with that is growing into his body, which he is very long at 6'6". But I wouldn't make too much of that. Football players coming off shapes and sizes. And just because he is not a physical specimen, with muscles popping out like pie everywhere, I wouldn't worry about it too much. He's a highly productive football player who has good film and has the ability to grow because, like I said, he's played 1 year of junior college ball and 1 year of college ball at Nebraska, redshirted in 2023 at Nebraska. So still a guy that can fill out, and I don't put too much stock in that. Like I said, you take a physical comp, and he the way he's built as a 20-year-old, and he probably looks a lot like way Max Crosby looks for the Raiders. So it would be a big get, and certainly he said that he would be making that decision within the next 24 to 48 hours. And since I was going to bring it up later, but since we're there, let's talk about Patrick Payton because he kind of fits into the same lens that we view Darrell Jackson in, other than Darrell finished the season stronger than Patrick did. But the longer this goes on, guys, I think the more likely it is for him to rejoin this team. And if you look and listen, you can't just send a guy packing, no matter what his baggage is, if you don't have anybody to replace him with. And right now, you don't have anybody coming in, and besides James Williams, we think. But you've already lost multiple players on the defensive front. My argument would be the same that I had for Darrell to come back. You got a guy that has not played up to his potential, that has left plays out on the field, needs to play with a faster motor. Do these new voices on defense resonate? And because he's hurt himself, has hurt his value, not only with NFL draft, but I would imagine with other colleges, do you get him back at a discounted rate via the NIL? And here's the thing, guys, and the portal works both ways. You bring that kid back for the spring. If he does not come in and bust his ass and meet and beat expectations of the new staff, then you escort him to compliance on April 1st or April 15th and say, hey, Patrick, this is not going to work out. I think he's more than likely coming back. What do you guys think?
I mean, you could go.
I think the difference, like you said, I think the difference is how Darrell finished the season versus how Pat did. I think I am far from the only person. I mean, you talked about it a little who I think you can call into question the effort of Pat Payton down the season once it was clear how much of a lost cause that season was. I think it doesn't take much watching of the film to see that. And that makes me question, is it a good idea culturally to bring him back? That being said, you're right. We've seen what he can do productive-wise. I think I have to imagine the exit interview that Mike Norvell had with him after the season was pretty fascinating. Just about, I'm sure they might have got into what happened this year and things like that. But I mean, I think you could give him the chance of the spring, and you have to see it for yourself, and he's going to have to probably earn some trust back. But I think is it worth taking that risk if he doesn't have a better option? And like you said, maybe there is a discount because we've seen what he can do, and it sure looks like you're going to be putting him opposite a productive pass rusher again, as to where he didn't always have that with Marvin Jones Jr. like we thought he would this past season.
Yeah. Fish.
Listen, when you can rush the passer, a lot could be forgiven.
Yeah.
And it's that trait, being able to put pressure on opposing teams' quarterbacks. It makes it a lot easier decision to say, hey, do you want to bring this guy back? I mean, he has shown the ability to rush the passer. I think if he's had another elite guy opposite him when he had Jared Verse on the opposite side, it made his game go to another level. So if they get the guy from Nebraska, all of a sudden it takes a lot of pressure off Pat. Listen, I said at the time, I said this, when you go 2-10, a lot of schools aren't going to be thrilled to just take you in the portal. I think when these guys had interviews, even with other teams, I'm sure they've spoken. And it's how you answer those questions. And I'm sure they didn't get very good responses back from scouts in the NFL or other coaches. Every kid on this team has to own 2-10. They were all part of it. And I think it's how you answer those questions. And if you're one of those guys blaming the other guys on the team for the lack of success, I don't think that's going to bode well for you getting paid from these other colleges or the NFL. So I think a lot of that has to do with these guys coming back. I think Pat will probably come back. I think he's someone that's probably already tested the waters.
Yep, I agree.
Behind closed doors, and he's probably not liking the response too much.
Yeah, listen, and again, I think if it's done with the understanding that, listen, you've got 4 months to prove yourself to the new staff, and then if this is still not going to be a sustainable long-term relationship, we get out of it. But I do think the fact that Florida State had a subpar season and that Patrick had a subpar season as well individually. The one thing that does not require any talent is effort. And to your point, Kurt, that's what you got to see from him in the spring, in the offseason, conditioning drills. If he doesn't give you that, then in the spring, then I think that you find another home for him. But just simply where from Florida State is right now at a number standpoint on this defensive line. And here's the other thing, guys. I think depending on I don't think he's got to be a 4-down player in this defense, right? He's more of a pass rush defensive end. He's not going to be as big a liability if you bring him back, because he's not going to play when you go into a bear front, which is a nose and 2-3 techniques. He's not going to play in that scheme, and they're going to run a little bit of that here. He would be a guy similar to like James Williams was talking about, where he was more of a 3rd-down guy this past season for Nebraska, and I think that'll change as James's body continues to develop. So anyway, interesting to see what happens there. A ton of stuff going on today. We've got several prospects on campus. We've had several prospects. Obviously, I would assume that everybody knows that they have signed Boston College quarterback Thomas Castellanos and Nebraska linebacker Stephon Thompson, and then obviously former FSU tight end and former Arizona State tight end Marqueston Douglas are all back in the fold now. They've signed officially. They're there. But there's a lot of guys on campus, guys. We've seen Marcellus Marshall, the former UCF offensive lineman, was on campus last weekend. I really felt good about that Florida State getting a visit so quickly after Herb Hand was named the offensive line coach. But Marcellus continues to visit, right? He left here to go to Northwestern and is now making a kind of a West Coast swing. So we have not heard anything back on him yet. But then Caden Kittler, the University of Central Florida starting center from last year, is on campus today. I feel good about that one. I don't know about you guys. And then they had Arkansas center Addison. I want to call him Austin for some reason. Addison Nichols.
I kind of want to do the same thing, but yeah, it's
was
Addison.
on here yesterday. And I have a source close to the family indicates that's all. If Florida State wants him, this is where he's coming. So I've put in, if I could put in a future cast, I would put in a future cast for Addison Nichols to Florida State. But that is 2 starting offensive linemen from other P4 programs that would be an instant upgrade. Kurt, go ahead.
Well, I wonder though. I mean, Kittler and Nichols were both centers at their last spot. So, like, do you take both of them, or do you try and make one a guard? Like, how would you, or is that an either-or situation?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think one of them could probably – I mean, if you can play center, you can play guard. And
for sure,
Nichols was signed out of high school as an offensive tackle and played offensive tackle at Arkansas this past spring. Now, is he a guy you can kick around and move around a little bit? We'll see. We haven't seen him in action, so I don't know what his lateral movement skills are like. But
he said he's being recruited as a center.
Yeah,
but obviously those things can change. Like he said, that's how Florida State views him. But yeah, those things can change.
Well, and to your point, it may be, at one time we were expecting both Addison and Caden Kittler in on the same day, and maybe that's why that did not work out that way. Now it could be that Kittler had another visit to make. We're just reading the tea leaves there. Listen, I think there's reason to feel really good about Vandy offensive. Now, this is a true offensive tackle, and Gunnar Hansen, who was on campus today, and we saw leave campus yesterday, and we saw leave campus today. We did not get a chance to talk to him, but he's a guy that has started 37 games for Vandy last year, offensive tackle. But that would be a big lick for Florida State if they could get all 3 of those guys, 2 of the 3, because right now, Fish, the efficiency in recruiting, even at the portal standpoint for right now, is offensive line. What do you think about those 3 kids?
Bring them in. I mean, we saw enough of the O-line last year that honestly, I think anything is an upgrade. Plus, listen, I'm not going to downgrade every guy they have on their roster. I've said over and over, I think there's a lot of guys on the roster that really need the opportunity to play. You and I both like Otto. I think there's some other guys in that mix that could play at Florida State. But this also, you bring guys in, it brings competition. And competition, they always say, breeds excellence. So I think improving the room will also help some of those younger guys possibly get better as well.
Yeah. And listen, we'll see some guys. Listen, they made a change at the offensive line coach, so hopefully you'll see more or quicker development out of the existing guys on the roster. That would be one reason you would make that change. And Herb Hand has a long history of producing quality offensive linemen and quality offensive lines, and there is some talented pieces in that room. We like the Lucas Simmons kid. We like obviously Andre. We've seen sporadic times where Jalen Early has played really well. We think that freshman class that they signed last year, Jonathan Daniels, those kind of kids are kids that still are too early to call where they could be in their development and have a chance to be good players. We thought Bryson Estes was going to be in the portal. He has not gotten into the portal. I wonder how much of that has to do with Herb Hand being here. But you've got some young guys, Jaden Todd, Manasseh TT, Ty Hilton, all heavily thought of. You got a chance to get Richie Leonard back. So if you could – I wanted to see a minimum of 4 offensive linemen brought in via the portal. We'll see how that works out. What was y'all's number for offensive linemen in the portal?
I didn't have a set number. I think they have to bring in as many as that can come in. If it's 5, 6, 7, I really don't think they can limit. They need to bring in guys, and if they bring in too many, they'll weed out other guys that that can't play here. So. Yep. I've said all along, I don't think anybody's spot on this team should be guaranteed, especially the way they played last year. So we'll see.
No, I was talking about a minimum number too.
Yeah, especially not there where you're losing so much experience, and what you have returning is largely unproven. I mean, you need that experience from the portal.
I think 4 is a minimum, and I think upwards of 6 or 7 is probably the more target number. So
Herb Hand has his hands full, you could say, and we talked to him today, and I was already the track record spoke for itself, but he's a compelling guy. I pretty much right away in his press conference today got it. I encourage you to go watch it on our YouTube channel. Him talking about what he values in offensive linemen, talking about how to manage the portal, talking about he actually said he was the first coach when he was at Texas to offer Jalen Early in high school. And Jalen Early, I think in their early talk, Jalen said, "Oh yeah, Coach Hand, he was my first offer." And he also is like a serious chef. Do you know he was on Chopped on the Food Network?
No, I did not.
Yeah, he was on an episode of Chopped.
Oh, I got to go back and watch now.
He got a phone call, but he was outside after the press conference. He was showing us. He has the video of his intro saved on his phone. I think it's when he was at Vandy.
Did he get past the first round at least?
I do not think he got past the first round, but still to make it there is pretty.
Well, I'm predicting right now Jalen Early is not going to be in the portal.
No.
But, he is. And William, we appreciate the comment. Appreciate you watching the show. You do so on a regular basis. Thank you for that. But listen, I think a fresh voice in that room could resonate just as much as it could on the defensive side of the ball. And listen, I know Herb a little bit from years gone back. He knew my father, who was a coach at the time at South Florida, South Carolina. I met Herb somewhere in the late 1990s, early 2000s when we were both young men. Now we're not. We're both gray and getting older and bigger. But he's got a great personality, and he's a good coach. So I look forward to seeing how that plays out. Another position of interest, obviously, for Florida State is tight end. That picture, at least portal-wise, is becoming a little bit clearer. Obviously, they've had 3 tight ends enter the portal, guys, in Jackson West, Brian Courtney, and Jarrell Powers. That leaves you really with 1 full-time scholarship tight end coming back in Landon Thomas because, A, we don't know the health status of Amari Williams for the spring. He was hurt in the last game. And, B, there's rumors and it's not. I don't think it's a rumor. I think it's been said they're going to give him a shot at outside linebacker / defensive end when he does come back. And I'm not sure that you can. Could he spot play at tight end? Sure, but I don't think you can play outside linebacker, defensive end, and tight end full time. It's a little bit more physical than playing corner wide receiver. So, long story short, we're assuming based on what we were told about him going over to the defense that right now Florida State has one scholarship tight end returning in Landon Thomas. Randy Pittman, UCF tight end and former FSU commitment, was on campus. Since then, two tight ends, Louisiana's Terrence Carter and Texas A&M's Jaden Platt, have both canceled visits to Florida State. Platt committed to Arkansas about an hour or so ago, and we think that was more of a we're going to fill each other out type of visit, more so than it was an offer type visit. And then it looks like the kid from Elon is going to end up at an SEC school, Cody Hardy, who was on Florida State's board. But how do you guys read the tea leaves with Platt and Carter no longer visiting? Makes me think that there's going to be a reuniting of Randy Pittman and Gus Malzahn at Florida State. And just so people know, Randy was a very integral part of UCF's offense this year. He's tied for the team lead in receptions and was second in targets. So how are you guys reading the tight end room, or what's going on with the portal and the tight end position? Kurt?
Oh, I was letting Fish go that time. Yeah, I think so. I think Randy, if I saw correctly, I think ended up at Arizona State yesterday. So it's not a purely cut and dry recruitment of a one school, like one visit, shut it down type thing. But obviously, I think the Malzahn tie helps there, and I think obviously the Norvell tie too is a former Florida State commit in their 2023 class at one time. I mean, I think the production stands for itself. I think obviously Florida State has, I think, some young tight ends that they're understandably high on. Obviously, we'll see where Amari lands long term. I know they've talked about they're going to try him out some on defense in the spring, and it may be a mix and match for him in the spring to see where he can be more impactful and where he's more needed. But I think I like how that room's shaping up. I like bringing Biscuit back. I know we all do, but I think Randy is a pretty good long-term option, just to add another potent player in the passing game to the offense.
Yeah, another just you're right. He was committed to Florida State for over a year before he decommitted and ended up signing with UCF. So there is a long-standing relationship there. He is a Panama City, Florida native. So if you're Florida State, you're hoping a chance to be closer to home, be in the same offense that you were last year where you're highly successful. You would hope that maybe that will be the difference than going all the way out to either Phoenix, which is one of the places he was scheduled to visit, and Kirk has confirmed that. And he was also planning to visit Virginia Tech. We'll see whether that ends up panning out or not. So it's going to be interesting to see how. So it looks like maybe just two tight ends in the portal. Fish, that was another position. I had a minimum of three. How do you see ultimately the tight end portal prospects playing out?
Yeah, they're probably going to probably get another one somehow. You know, there's still time to find somebody else, but I think they need a third one. They need a guy that's a blocker. I mean, Pittman's not really a blocker; he's a receiving type tight end. I know Marqueson's more of a blocker, but he's not a big. You know, they want somebody like 6'6" type guy, like they were going to get from Elon. So it wouldn't shock me if they go after one more. I do think they need another, at least body there, especially if they're moving Amari to defense, because the freshman kid's not going to be ready to play this year unless you want to throw him out there. But I don't think that's what you want to really be doing, is starting freshmen 2 years in a row or playing them a lot. So.
No, you'd like to get him a redshirt year if you can, and that's why I would think that's one of the reasons you are bringing in a Marqueson Douglas and a Randy Pittman. And I don't know how much Chase Lofton can help in the blocking game. And as we've heard many times now, this is going to – Mike's offense was run first, and we know Gus is. They were top 10 in the nation the last 2 years at UCF in rushing offense. They've got they run the ball a heck of a lot, and you're going to need some tight ends to do that. So we'll see what happens there. Now, we're getting a little bit of a run on receivers. Charlotte receiver, Omega. God, what is Omega's last name? I just call him Omega. Blake he arrived this morning. He's here. Alabama wide receiver Kendrick Law is supposed to be coming to town. We had not seen him as of the time I left the Moore Center today. Nick Carlisle is out there posted up right now, so hopefully we'll have news on that sooner rather than later. But Fish, that's 2 receivers. We saw some of the early names at receiver. Reggie Virgil from Miami, Ohio, committed to Texas. Javon Tracy, same school, has not planned a visit to Florida State. Creed Whittemore from Mississippi State is committed to Utah. So they're kind of going down the wide receiver list. How do you see this playing out for FSU as far as receivers and the portal?
Yeah, I think if they could get Deuce Robinson, that'd be a piece to add to the puzzle. He gives them size. If there's any guys that they're looking at, they're under 6 feet, unless they're really, really good. I'd like to see them develop some of the guys on their roster. I thought they signed a very good class last year. I think there's some guys in there that can play at this level, play at a high level. I think you got to be very careful so you don't start, pushing some of those guys out before you had a chance to really watch them. Unless they could go out and get somebody that's a difference maker that's in that under 6 foot group, I would probably take a pass. I'd really, like I said, I think if they could get someone like Deuce Robinson, who gives them that Johnny Wilson type feel, a big guy that you could stretch outside. He's been very productive. I think he would be a very good catch. Some of these other guys, it just seems like they're just trying to bring in other guys. I don't think they want a situation where they had last year, where they brought in guys from other teams that weren't productive, didn't play at those schools. Just to take them because you once recruited them. I don't think that's a good idea. I think they got enough guys on the roster. Unless they are difference makers, I wouldn't really go too hard after these guys.
Yeah. Another kid to keep on was Eric Rivers from FIU. He has heard from FSU, visiting Georgia Tech and Nebraska, but has not been on campus yet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think the other position, you're going to start seeing more players come in. I think at linebacker, obviously you've got Stephon Thompson, but with the 3-3 defense, you really need to add another 2 or 3, I think, to this roster. So I think we'll start seeing possibly some more linebackers come in for visits over the next 5 days. I think that's what we've got left in this visit period. Then it'll shut down for Christmas through the new year. And then Florida State and other schools can bring in more prospects January 1st through January 5th for mid-year guys. It cannot be for guys that are not going to enroll in January, although I don't know how you go about proving that. I guess they make a change their mind. But anyway, so interesting there. All right, guys, well, that kind of quickly catches everybody up on the portal. I think what we're going to do now is take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the new assistant coaches, because Fish has some knowledge of 2 guys from the Miami area that have joined Florida State staff, and that is safeties coach Evan Cooper and wide receiver coach Tim Harris Jr. So if you'll bear with us for about a minute, we'll be right back for the second half of Seminole Sidelines.
The Backshore. That stretch of fluffy sand just beyond the reach of the salty waves. The place reserved for volleyball nets, cookouts, and the air filled with fun and laughter. Celebrate the Backshore with Backshore Apparel. Grab an amazingly soft and comfy Backshore Apparel beach hoodie to keep you protected from the sun's harmful rays. Or the Backshore revamped trucker hat, a modern twist on a classic favorite. Crafted from moisture-wicking fabrics, ensuring they're lightweight and breathable. Not to mention durable with their unique floating feature. Shop now at BackshoreApparel.com. And right now, FSU fans get 10% off your order with code FSU10. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com. Hey, Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop.
All right, welcome back to the second half of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. I am Pat Burnham, and I'm being joined by Osceola's Kurt Weiler and recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein. All right, guys, there are a lot of things going on with the program, as we've already talked about, but they introduced 4 new coaches to the local media today. Defensive line coach Terrence Knighton, safeties coach Evan Cooper, offensive line coach Herb Hand, and new wide receivers coach Tim Harris Jr. Since the last time we talked, they have moved John Papugis to linebacker coach and special teams coordinator, and I guess he's going to get an assistant linebackers coach at Ernie Sims. So be interesting to see 2 guys coach 3 guys. But anyway, I've never seen that, but we'll see how it works out. Fish, we've talked a little bit about Coach Hand. I know Coach Hand. You know Coach Hand. What we don't know so much about, at least Kurt and I, and maybe some FSU fans, a little bit about Evan Cooper. He was the safeties coach for Tony White at Nebraska, is coming to Florida State in a similar role, and he'll split the defensive backfield with Pat Surtain. What do you know about Evan, and what makes him a good fit for Florida State, not only on the football field but on the recruiting trail?
I mean, Coach Cooper, he's worked his way up. I got to give him a lot of credit. He's somebody that, has gone through the process of building his resume. I know he went with Coach Rule at Temple originally. Then he went to to Baylor. Is now, I think he did some time possibly in the NFL, and now he's was back with him at Nebraska. One thing about Coach Cooper, recruiting's been a big deal for him. That's how he's made his chops in the whole process. As far as a coach, he hasn't done a lot of coaching. He's been more of an off the field guy at most of the stops. But the fact that he was very instrumental in their success at Baylor and also at Temple and where he was at Nebraska. So that's huge. He has, the ability to recruit Florida. I've always said that's very important, that Coach Norvell with his first staff didn't have a lot of those guys that had ties to Florida. Coach Cooper does. I think that's a big plus from the recruiting standpoint. As far as coaching, your guess is as good as mine. He hasn't done a whole lot of it. He's been more of a assistant to an assistant. So we'll get to see that. I'm of the belief that basically the players make the coach more than the coach makes the players. So if he's able to recruit top-end kids at a program like Florida State, which should not be a problem, then the results are going to be positive and he's going to look like a great coach. So I think from that standpoint, if he can recruit at a high level, then FSU got a very good coach.
All right. Well, I know the Harris family a little bit when I was at USF. Tim Harris Sr. was the head coach at Miami Northwestern. He had a padded football camp every summer, and he used to bring his teams up to USF's padded summer camps in the early 2000s. I think Tim was probably a player on those teams, not a coach. But what do you know about Tim, and what makes him a good get for Florida State?
Yeah, I mean, even though I've been around the football coaches down here a lot, I know his coach, his father a little more, and also Brandon Harris. Tim's kind of a quiet guy. He's kind of stayed to himself. I know him personally, and I've dealt with him personally on certain levels. As I haven't really followed his career as much as some of these other guys. When he went to UCF, we communicated a little bit, not a whole lot. I think he's someone that can be an addition if he can recruit. The recruiting side is huge. He's going to, Northwestern's loaded with a lot of young guys. His family has ties to Northwestern. That will be huge next year with some of the stuff at Chaminade. So if those guys could go in and recruit some of those top-end kids at those schools, I think that'll be a plus. That's my most important thing. I think a receiver coach at the end of the day that could teach routes, but if you could get guys that already could do a lot of those things, and the coaching side's great, but these guys have to have the talent, and you're at Florida State. I think if you could go get some of those elite guys, and if these guys can do that, they're going to look a lot better as coaches.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I do want to ask both of you this question. Obviously, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, John Papagis was retained and moved to linebackers coach. Were you guys surprised by that? Any thoughts on it? I know that I was somewhat surprised just because of the play of the defensive ends this year and being effort-driven, some of the issues there. But what were y'all's thoughts on JP coming back? Were you surprised, I guess? And if you want to add on to that.
No, I wasn't surprised at all. He was one of the coaches all along I was told was safe when they decided they were going to go and, break this thing up. He was one of the guys that I kept being told that if there was like 3 coaches that were safe, it was him, Surtain, and also Coach Johnson, the running backs coach. All the other guys were up for grabs. But he was one that I was never thinking twice that he was going to come back. He had success in prior years. Yeah, the guys didn't do well, but with the success with Jermaine and also with Verse last year. And then you look at what he's done as a special teams coach, you can argue that Florida State had one of the better special teams, not only in the ACC, but the country. So I think he wants him on the staff. I think he's one of those guys he trusts. I think Coach Pap's a good coach. It's just finding the right fit for him in this program.
And he has coached linebackers in previous stops. Kurt, go ahead.
No, I agree. I think the special teams, I wasn't sure officials would get to it. I think that was a saving grace on this season where obviously, yes, his unit didn't play up to snuff, but we've seen what they've done in the past. And we even in this year, the special teams were good enough. I think I agree that I am not surprised to see him stay. I'm interested how he is at the new position now going forward.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Of course, I don't know how they, see coaching 2 linebackers, 3, 1. I don't know how they do that because there's multiple front defense and they can do different things with the outside linebacker, depending on what they're doing. But yeah, so we're getting a little bit more clarity on the coaching staff. It certainly looks right now like Tony Tokarts, Chris Thompson, and David Johnson are coming back. We've seen Tony very involved with Gus Malzahn in the portal recruiting process. Obviously, David welcomed a 2026 running back to campus today, and Chris has been hosting the tight ends on these official visits. So, Kurt, are you anticipating you think we're status quo and it's just a particularly on the offensive side of the ball where there has not been any definitive – I don't think there's been any definitive statements released like the defense. So what is your anticipation there?
I mean, I would think if a move were going to happen, it would have happened by now, right? I feel like, as you're recruiting these portal kids, you want them to know who the position coach is going to be. It'd be a surprise if at this point there was a change for a guy who's been around the last few weeks.
Yeah. Fish, what about you?
I could still – you never know. I think that there's still a chance that Pat Surtain ends up going to the NFL.
That's the wild card.
Yeah, that's a wild card. And you never know. Coach Norvell seems to really like Tony. He's a guy that has come up the ranks in his coaching career. So we'll see what happens. It would not surprise me either way. I could still see 1 or 2 changes possibly. They're going to see how this portal thing goes. If they don't have success, and he was responsible for some of these guys, he could be on the move. So.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Well, listen, it's a fascinating time of year. There's a lot going on. There'll be a lot going on the rest of the week, and you can go to theosceola.com and check out all our coverage of what's going on with FSU on the portal front. And right now we've got our exit interview with Nebraska defensive end James Williams. We've got Kurt's article on defensive tackle Darrell Johnson's reversing course and staying at Florida State, and obviously Terrence Knighton's involvement in that. We've also got our post-visit article on Arkansas offensive lineman Addison Nichols. Troy Bowles, a linebacker from Georgia, was on campus yesterday. We also have that interview as well. And then, of course, we also, for subscribers, have our portal recruiting board thread. It's about 6 pages deep, but it is updated pretty much on an hourly case, if not sooner than that. We've got a lot of new breaking stuff including guys who we thought were coming on campus that may not be, some guys that we hear are coming on campus. So please go to theosceola.com and check that out. But you do have to be a subscriber to get to our portal thread, which we have an outgoing portal thread and an incoming portal thread. So you get the latest information there. We're kind of hanging. We don't know if we're going to have a show on Thursday or not. There's a lot going on with our staff, including covering the portal and basketball and everything else. We got some people on the road on Thursday potentially, so we will let you know if we're going to have a show on Thursday, probably on Thursday morning. We'll put it out there, and that's a great reason to sign up for the Osceola YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe button right now, and then also sign up for notifications so that you get alerts as to when we're going to have a live or taped show. But a ton going on with Florida State. We think that they'll know more about James Williams tomorrow. His commitment timeline set by him, which obviously can change, is either Wednesday or Thursday is what it told us today. And then, of course, like I said, there's several kids on campus right now, including 2 receivers, Omega Blake, and hopefully by now Kendrick Law, as well as Cade Kittler, the offensive lineman from UCF. So we appreciate you guys joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and hopefully we will see you on Thursday. Fish, Kurt, appreciate it. I know we've all got to stick our nose back into the computer and start researching, but we enjoyed coming up for air and talking for a little bit because we haven't been doing a lot of that lately. So I've been doing a lot of digging, no talking. But you guys have a great one. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.